Fear is a universal human emotion. When do we feel fear? We feel fear in situations that are threatening and unpredictable. A key feature of fear is that it can take the wind out of our sails. It can stop us in our tracks. This can be true for us as individuals or in large organizations. My name is Cybele Raver, and I serve as provost for Vanderbilt University, one of the nation's leading universities. During the first few months of the pandemic, my colleagues and I had to face our own and our students' fears. We faced the grave threat of health challenges for our entire community. We faced the challenge of figuring out how to offer thousands of classes and whether to put research worth millions of dollars on hold. That's the very definition of crisis, and it was tempting to hunker down and wait for the crisis to pass. But effective leaders do not hunker down, they wade in. Fortunately, we have powerful tools with which to manage the fears that get in our way. When we do, we can galvanize ourselves and our organizations to find creative solutions that propel us forward. We open up whole new opportunities when we do that. Before becoming the chief academic officer of a major university, I served as a scientist for 25 years of my career, working on how children and adults manage and regulate their thoughts and emotions. I focused closely on how children's brains process fear and how they manage their thoughts in those frightening situations. For example, I studied children's neurocognitive development in the context of gun violence on the one hand and positive preschool classrooms on the other. My team and I discovered the ways that we can use our ability and our cognitive functions right here, located in the prefrontal cortex, to focus our attention on new information, to think creatively about the problem in a way that allows us to see it from a new perspective or in a new light, and our ability to plan and execute that plan in order to get through a challenging situation. Those cognitive capacities are amazing. And again, they are to help us in focusing on new information, to think creatively, and to plan and then execute that plan. When we use these parts of our brain to regulate our emotions through these 3 steps, it gives us the double benefit of reducing those negative feelings and of thinking our way to new solutions. Today, as a quantitative social scientist and as a leader in higher education, I continue to see the effects of fear. As we continue to navigate the global pandemic, I see the risk for young adults, our future generation of leaders, in feeling overwhelmed by their anxiety and their worry. To be sure, students are right to point out that they have good reason to worry. Our nation faces a set of existential threats, including threats to our democracy in terms of our commitment to racial and socioeconomic equity, and in terms of the fate of our planet and our future. We cannot simply tell students to get a grip and to feel less worried. Instead, we must look not only to how to help them manage fear, but how we can use it to spark their commitment to think about new solutions in moving boldly forward. We must approach fear not just as a source of potential paralysis, but rather as an emotion that can spark imaginative thinking and big, bold plans that can be executed. When I think about my own fear, I think about an encounter I had with a grizzly bear in the Teton Mountain Range. Every couple of years, my daughter and I have always taken backpacking trips in the Tetons, and we love those trips. On our last trip, when she was a teenager, we had taken a long morning's hike, we were really fatigued, and we decided to set our packs down and take a break by the side of a pristine, crystal emerald lake. We took our backpacks off and set them against a tree, and we set ourselves up on a boulder to relax. And we did one thing that we are told never to do, which is that we took our canisters of bear spray off and left them by the sides of our packs, rather than keeping them close at hand. My daughter was watercoloring. She had a small set of watercolor paints, and I was just resting and taking in the view, when suddenly a very large grizzly bear came from out of the forest along the trail and stopped about 25 feet from us. Needless to say, as you can imagine, I was overcome, truly overwhelmed. Both my mind and my body were overcome by terror. But in that minute, while my human instinct was to freeze, I pushed myself to assess the situation more deeply. Was it better to stay as still as possible, or better to go ahead and make the leap and grab the bear spray? In that moment, I focused my attention to locate the bear spray so I knew exactly where it was. I used my imagination and really tried to tap my mental creativity to imagine reaching for the spray, pulling off the safety, and directing it toward the ground between me and the bear. Could I manage that? And then I used my mental planning capacity to develop a mental plan, to wait and to see if the bear took a step toward me. When the bear did take that step, I took that leap, grabbed the bear spray, aimed it in that space between me and the bear reared backwards once the spray was released and loped on down the trail. I know that it was my brain's capacity, this amazing capability that we all have, to focus my attention, to think creatively, and to mentally plan, and then to execute that plan that saved us that day. In some ways, the catastrophic onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020 really triggered similar responses. Across the world, everyone was faced with true peril, unparalleled moments of uncertainty and threat. Here at Vanderbilt University, our team and many institutions' teams across the country came head to head with monumental decisions. The sense of fear was daunting and pervasive. But the question from the Tetons still is exactly the question that we faced. Is it better to stay still, or is it better to take the leap? Organizations, individuals, institutions, and governments all came up with different variations to answer that question. At Vanderbilt and many universities, the response was similar to mine on that mountain. Leaders focused on the moment at hand. We assessed the situation. We actively focused our attention on new data, on gathering as much new information as we could. We allowed ourselves to think creatively, and then when the moment was right, we took the leap. At Vanderbilt, this meant devising inventive solutions that enabled students to return to campus for in-person learning. And it meant developing a roadmap for carefully and gradually reopening the labs that housed scientific discoveries that we could not risk losing. As it turns out, those very labs led to the life-saving COVID-19 treatments and vaccines that we still rely on at this moment. Even when plagued with fear, universities couldn't freeze. We had to keep moving. We walked the thin line between ambition and rigor, between the creative and the planful. The result, following months of around-the-clock work and creative and radical collaboration, was not only action, but a level of forward momentum that we could once never have imagined. As individuals and as a nation, we must follow this path. We must regulate our collective sense of being overwhelmed by fear together. We can do that by taking a deep breath and by deploying our truly remarkable capacity to use our brains collectively to see the threat or challenge in a new way. And then we can invent our way forward out of fear. Collaboration and diverse perspectives are absolutely necessary to that endeavor. It's critical that we have team members who can focus our attention on new facts, who can imagine a new and inventive solution, and who can plan and then execute that plan with us. In short, everyone at the table has something important to contribute, and as we make those decisions, we move forward together. As Vanderbilt's provost, it's my job to work with my colleagues to show students, parents, and our communities that universities must take the lead in carving this path forward. At Vanderbilt, we have a phenomenal faculty who do exactly that through science, discovery, innovation, and creative expression. Equipped with these tools, we can train the next generation of young leaders to invent and implement bold new solutions to the existential threats that we face. by engaging with and believing in the research and innovation that happens at Vanderbilt and at institutions of higher education across the world, we can solve the most intractable problems that the world faces today and reach our full potential as a society. So that's my answer to the overarching question that we are asked to answer today. The one thing that I have learned during the COVID-19 pandemic is to trust in ourselves and to invest in ourselves as creators of new knowledge and solutions in the face of threats and uncertainty. And I invite you to invest in yourselves as creators of new solutions and as inventors of new paths forward. By analyzing our own experiences and pushing ourselves as learners, as innovators, and as makers of plans, we can propel ourselves from fear to action. We can lead the nation and the world to a more equitable, better future for the next generation. Thank you.